All right, we're up. This is the Hour Time with Troy By. And sitting before me is Fred. Is it Wiersig?
Wiersig, yep.
Wiersig, got it. I don't know how I figured out that pronunciation, but maybe I heard it
People
somewhere.
either get it or they don't. Like, it's either like, is it Wiersig? And I'm like, no, not Wiersig. It's just Weir. It's all good.
What's interesting is there's a professional golfer, Mike Weir, from Canada.
Okay.
But he spells it W-E-I-R, and yours is
That's what's weird.
W-I-E-R. But
That's
it's still
weird.
the same,
Something weird with the
pronunciation.
German. That's what I always blame. I'm like, I don't know. It's the German. I don't know what you want.
Yeah. So let's congratulate you. So as part of the introduction here, you just graduated UAH.
Yes.
You commissioned as a second lieutenant
Yes.
in
the
the
Army
reserve
Guard.
and the Army Guard, National Guard. And you are also the founder, CEO, if you will, of Wiersig Enterprises, which I think dates all the way back to when you were a freshman.
I want to say 2018. It kind of started in high school as kind of like, a guy I know needed a website. And I was like, that's not too bad to do. People don't know how to do it. I figured it out.
Yeah.
I'll see what can happen. A couple other people that, my parents knew were like, oh, he makes websites. I was charging, I was like, oh, $50.
So that's where it started in websites?
Yeah, I was like, this is good money, $50. I'll take that. Little did I know, the reason people were so like, sure, I'll do it is it's like $500 just to do it on Wix. And so I was like, let's rethink the business model here.
Yeah.
And I started to, move out, go to college, actually have real life expenses that weren't like, I want to go to the movies this weekend because the $50 covered that.
Right.
When I wanted to get groceries, didn't cover that.
Yeah.
And so that kind of evolved from there, and I realized there's a ton of stuff that just adds on to it. With a website, you probably need email or some of the basic tech support stuff. I mean, the people that came to us weren't the most tech proficient people ever. They came to us because they said, we don't want to deal with this. Can you do it? And I go, sure, yeah. And every once in a while, someone would say, hey, do y'all do blank? And I'd go, we don't, but we can.
Mhm.
And I'd figure it out and go from there, and we'd add another thing to our little roster of random services. Eventually it got to the point where I figured out exactly what we were good at, what we needed to keep doing, and what was like, we do this for one person, we make like $3 a month on it. Why are we focusing on this? And so it really came down to just a pretty core group of services like web design, marketing, SEO, a bunch of stuff like that. And I kind of got bored of it after a while, and so I started to as clients would fade off, I'd kind of let them just back off a bit. We didn't try and keep them on. I recommended them to local services, people who'd be able to do it on a longer term professional level, especially since I was getting to the end of college and going to start my real job. I'd feel bad not being able to get in contact with them throughout the day if they called me. I had one of my last clients recently before we're going to go kind of full just as needed work, intermittent graphic design if people needed or something like that, but no more of the full web hosting or website maintenance or stuff like that, unless it's a client that I can hire someone to do it for. It's just, I feel bad not giving them my full time. That's one thing that they loved, was it was like, yeah, we can just call you and you're on it.
Right.
But it kind of evolved from there. The Gaming Oasis thing, of course, came out of it in the long term, and so that really
real quick,
became
let's
my
pause
passion.
on who was the we that you mentioned. We was there a we at the beginning, or is it just you?
So Wiersig Enterprises was just me at the beginning.
Okay.
I always dreamed of making a little company called Wiersig Enterprises as a kid, and I was like, oh, this would be cool. I even made, renderings of a complex of like a, ridiculously expensive business complex that maybe it'll happen one day, but not today, I'll tell you that. And so no one then slowly got bigger. I'd bring in some friends and I'd teach them how to do stuff on it. My friend John, really good friend of mine, he actually came in and did a lot of web design work for me, web maintenance work, and he was great. Another friend, JR, I went to college with. He was in my fraternity, ATO, and he came in, he did some IT help and did a little bit of website maintenance help. And so when I started bringing people in like that, it got a little more feasible in the long term, but it wasn't at that like tipping point where you could just go all in. And I decided, let's back off and focus on something I'm a little more passionate about. Okay. And that's where the real we came in, was Gaming Oasis with a larger group of people there.
So you carried it over. You were at Huntsville High.
Yes.
Right. And you started Wiersig Enterprises there, basically junior and senior year.
Somewhere around there.
And then it just kind of carried over into college?
I'd say it definitely was big freshman year. And then during COVID is really when I started doing more of the actual business stuff, is because truthfully I had a lot more free time because I wasn't going and sitting in lectures for most of my days. It was all online. A lot of them were just pre-recorded, and truthfully I maybe didn't watch all of them, but right. Things happen.
As long as you pass.
Yeah, exactly. I got out of there. That's what mattered.
This episode is brought to you by TPG. TPG is the founder of the quality assurance industry and most known for the tagline, "This call may be monitored for quality assurance." which they brought to the call center market more than 26 years ago. They dominate the market with an internationally recognized client base of Fortune 500 brands. They have created the quality standards used by their clients and have defined 307 attributes that they measure to define a great conversation, including complex concepts such as skills associated with empathizing and rapport building with customers. For more information on TPG, visit them at tpginc.com. Right.
With a different major, but we're not. It's all good.
Some change of plans.
Yeah, just a little bit. Computer engineering to industrial systems engineering, but I was like, I'm just gonna keep the engineering. Give me something.
Yeah.
But yeah, about then is when it kind of took off a bit, and then when we started getting back into the swing of things, I was my senior year. I was doing ROTC. I was, everything was back in person. I was like, I need to really consider, where my time's going here, and that's already when Gaming Oasis had started, which started, I'd say, like right around the beginning of COVID, if not like a month before everything kind of went off and everybody started going teleworking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, let's choose one or the other. Where am I more passionate? Where are more things going to go? And I definitely made the right choice there.
Which has the biggest upside?
Yeah. Which one am I going to, in 20 years, would I want it to be a full-time job?
Yeah. So the reason Fred is here is to really talk about esports,
exactly.
Which is this incredible industry that is forming. That's, I guess, still maybe in the growth phase, in the growth stage of the life cycle, right?
Yeah.
And what does that mean? So I was thinking about this. I just went on a run. That's kind of why I'm sweating a lot. It takes me a while to cool down. But I was kind of thinking of, how do you ask somebody to describe it?
Yeah.
What is esports, Fred? What is this? How do you explain it?
I think so. I've had a couple methods over the years because, truthfully, a lot of the time that I talk about esports with people, it's people that are established in the business world or people who are usually not on the younger side. Right. And so the easiest way to do it for me is do you know anything about a game called Rocket League?
Heard of it.
So it's basically RC cars that play soccer.
Yeah.
It's a simple concept. So I show them a little bit of it. I go, look, it's just like real sports, except instead of people kicking a soccer ball, you're driving this car. But then I wait a second, I have a clip, and it's just these guys playing. They're not super good, but then it kind of cuts to some really good players. They start throwing the ball into the air, chasing it with a rocket booster, and, hitting it into the goal. And everybody's like, whoa, what was that? And I go, that's esports. And so it's been really cool to see the reactions there because they're like, oh, I get this. It's just soccer, but with cars. That's a cool concept. But, like, why is this interesting? Like, we could just go watch soccer. And so every time they see the pop up and then someone fly up in the air and hit it, and then it cuts to like a crowd reaction of just the crowd going crazy.
Right.
It's actually an RLCS, I think, from 2018, which is just the Rocket League Championship Series. And so I found so often that it's hard to explain esports. So you show them just that little bit of like super fun, super hype moment that anybody can understand, and it just kind of clicks.
Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily. So if I was one of those people, or you approached me, and even if I'm old enough that, and you probably get, as a younger person, right, you probably get tired of people like me who are like, well, I remember Nintendo and Sega. Yeah. But then, life took over for me, and I haven't held on to gaming. Mm-hmm. I held on to other hobbies or interests, right? But to me, right away, esports, I would just think of, you're just talking about video games about sports. And that might be one thing, and maybe introducing a concept of like, cars, kicking, playing a soccer game. But then I would think beyond that, the more I've thought about this and researched it, then you just get into the competitive side of gaming.
Exactly.
And there's the sport of whatever. It could be a first-person shooter game, right? And if now we're in a modern world where you're playing that on Twitch and you're streaming it and people are watching it, and if there's a competition between people playing a first shooter game or whatever it is, well then that me seems like that's under the umbrella of esports. Is that accurate? Just from the competitive side,
I'd say so, and I think a huge part of that too is sometimes I love and sometimes I hate the esports label.
Yeah,
because we don't call football and soccer IRL sports,
right? And
it's like, truthfully, the way it should be, and it's not going to be there for a while, I don't think, is it shouldn't be esports. It should be Rocket League and Call of Duty. It should be just that's the sport is Rocket League. The sport is Call of Duty.
Right.
I don't think it's going to get there for a long time. It may never get there. But I think the best way for someone who's in the industry to look at it is each game is its own sport. like our league is the SEL, which is
Right.
just the esports version of the SEC. Our games
And define SEL for everyone real quick.
Southeastern Esports League.
Right.
And so our games are Rocket League, and this season we're also introducing Valorant. So we look at them as two different sports almost completely. Different commentators, different teams of staff, different teams entirely that are playing. They may be the same universities, but it's no different than their baseball team playing the same baseball team and their volleyball team playing the same volleyball team. And so it's kind of hard to differentiate it sometimes. And once again, I don't think it's going to get there for a long time. But it's definitely cool that I see people who like kind of view it that way. But I also get the same people that are like, you get paid to play video games, and it just hits them, and they're like, nah. I played the Nintendo as a kid. I would never get paid to play that. I'm like, well,
unless you're really good.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, people kind of did. When you go to the arcade and there'd be someone playing Street Fighter or something on the arcade machine, and you'd put $5 up on it.
Yeah,
it's just that, but now there's a lot more money behind it.
Yeah. So as a kind of a primer to everything we're going to discuss, I think this is going to be interesting for people if they know nothing about esports, because there's so many facets to this. And I come from a IT background, and I have an MBA, and I can certainly appreciate, I think, your position as the CEO of Gaming Oasis and the partners who we'll talk about here shortly that are involved with that with you. There are so many aspects to this. One of it's going to be just the underlying infrastructure that this stuff runs on, or a platform. We're gonna talk about migration. What if this new platform comes out? How do you move all your data over?
Been there.
There's if you have a competition and you want to build like an arena, we're gonna talk about that. Well, what does that look like? What do gamers want in an arena? What are those critical pieces? What does the uptime have to be? What does the bandwidth have to be? Right. So these are all these business requirements, and system requirements, if you will, that have unfortunately money attached to it.
Yeah, that's
right?
the big issue always.
And and there's but then we're also talking about okay, I would say 15, 20 years from now, when it's really has matured, it's going to be right alongside other sports. Like when we moved here and my kids go to Clemens, we didn't have fishing and archery and bowling as sports in Virginia. So this is new to us, right? Like, hey, this is really cool. So, hey, what a cool opportunity, particularly for my youngest boy who's found his thing in archery. He would have never found that in Virginia. But, 15 and 20 years from now, you're going to see esports at the high school level, and these kids are going to be getting drafted or signing scholarships to go play at UAH, which is right.
And that's where we're kind of.
And then there's going to be professional beyond that. So this is like, for anybody that's having a hard time, this is no different than when the NFL and the NBA were trying to be something, or snowboarding was trying to be something, right?
Yeah,
or lacrosse. Pick a club sport, field hockey, right? They all have these humble beginnings, and really and then there's even because you're in a prone position the whole time. Well, now there's chiropractic type stuff that might come less, carpal tunnel, or just sitting in posture, and then you play for a long time, and there's probably a nutrition or some exercise, right? There's just so many elements that make this like, wow, this is not only like a new industry, but there's all these other things that are going to benefit from this in kind of a different way.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you just rambled all that off there, because it's
please.
like those are all things that I'm like, oh, these are all huge points, and we've been there. We've talked about all of it. Ironically enough, I want to hit on that last one because it's one that people will laugh at. We've seen it. Everybody laughs at it when we bring it up, and I even laughed at it at the beginning. I was like, that's so dumb. My marketing guy, Blake, when we first made the company, he was like, we need to get some form of orthopedic care, some form of physical therapy, anything of that sense on board as a sponsor. And I was like, Blake, what are they going to get out of this, man? And he was like, think about it. Carpal tunnel, posture in the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a huge thing. And we started doing research, and we actually see that on the professional side of esports, and esports is weird because usually it starts at the lower levels and works its way up. Well, it started at professional, and unironically, it might die at professional and then just go to collegiate and stay there. And we never really know. It's kind of been jumping around recently, especially with COVID and how much it could boom, but at the same time, it couldn't. And so all that kind of stuff that he talked about when it came down to like the orthopedic care and getting those kind of sponsors who could help kind of legitimatize esports as a whole. That was my goal, at least. His was more or less along the lines of maybe they don't know about it yet. And so it was really exciting to us to see that because we talked to them and they actually saw that and they were like, this makes sense. I mean, we do the same thing for office workers. Why not bring that into a sports field where, if anything, it'll be more intense? And we even see that a lot of them, like you mentioned, the nutritionist and the exercise, most, I hate to say it, but a lot of time when people picture, someone who plays video games for a living, they probably picture someone who sits in their chair all day and is very out of shape and, with the McDonald's bag and the Cheeto Puffs and they're just sitting there. It's really just not that. It's crazy to me because we actually had our most recent LAN. I met all the players. Some of these guys were the most in-shape people I had ever met in my life. Yeah. Like, we had a couple guys from University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and they just looked like someone you see them, you wouldn't expect them to be, a top-tier Rocket League player. They're in shape, good-looking guys. They're just there to play games. Yeah. And a lot of people are always shocked when they see that, I had some friends that don't know anything about esports stop by the event, and they were like, whoa. Like, this is not what I expected today. And it's because a lot of them, they train mentally, physically, and then they practice gaming in the other time.
Yeah.
And they have regular practice schedules. They have facilities where they go and practice. They have to hydrate properly. And the more I thought about it, I was like, that makes sense because your reaction time and your entire body slows down when you're out of shape like that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the bigger esports players, especially in like Korea, they run an absolute ton because it just keeps them going and keeps them going because over there it's extremely competitive. A lot of those countries and that side of the world they've adopted esports a lot more than we have, and they have it's intense. There's not just you're good at the game, it's you have to be physically, mentally tough. You have to be able to play the game for long periods of time. And it's honestly kind of crazy to me because getting into it, I was always, esports is cool. I love gaming. That's my thing. Never expected to get this in depth with it and realize there's this much science behind it and this much just preparation that goes into being on a competitive team.
Yeah.
So it's really just crazy to hit some of those points that you kind of brought up there because some people I guarantee are like, they can just sit there, eat snacks, and play games, and it's like, well, they actually have to do some other stuff.
I remember, so there's two things that I feel like I do well as an adult: golf and I snowboard. And in both cases, like Tiger, not only was really good, he changed the game of golf. Like they always joke, if you look at Phil Mickelson, like he was a pudgy fat guy during Tiger's prime, and they were all still like getting cheeseburgers at the turn at a tournament, right, or just eating hot dogs. And then he comes in and he's got he's working out, he's on a different nutrition plan, and he's just killing everyone. So what do? Well, now everybody works out, and actually many of them are jacked, right? And then like Shaun White, if you look at some of the documentaries, that dude, I mean, some serious, these aren't, so snowboarders always had the bad rep. There's just a bunch of pot smokers and, they're all dropouts and whatever. Well, you start to appreciate, the level to stay at that level, to be elite.
It takes work.
I mean, just the working out, the recovery, doing the whole ice plunges and stuff like that are tough at his age. And it paid off, for him to win a bunch of medals and things. And it'll be interesting to me, but at the same time, Shaun White, Tony Hawk and skateboarding, there's only a few names. And even though they're kind of done with their careers, but still they're the names that you associate with those sports. And it would be really cool. I think from an esports perspective, we're still kind of waiting. Who's that person that's going to just be, that's going to captivate not only the market, but just generally as a household name, is there anybody, can we just talk about that before we kind of go back into, as it applies to gaming, Oasis and UAH, is there anybody that you would say, hey, be on the lookout for this person. This person's going to be like a household name.
I don't know if I'd say a lot of the household names are people that have come from other sports who have just played esports and it's been a big thing. There's been a couple NBA players. I always forget their names. But they went from in the NBA to esports, and they actually got more money to go to esports, and it was crazy. And people were like, "Well, that doesn't make sense," because I really cannot remember for the life of me who it was. But
it wasn't Steph Curry because he's active, right? But
yeah, it wasn't Steph Curry. It's someone not at his level, but really close. But ironically enough, he was playing so much Rocket League that his performance in the NBA was kind of struggling.
Oh, really?
And then he ended up quitting the NBA and going straight to Rocket League. And I think his contract was $50 million for a year or something. It was something. It was insane for esports, honestly. It was a terrible business decision, but it was cool because now they had this ex-NBA player on their team.
Yeah.
But I think as games like Rocket League and Valorant start to become more of a more household name, I think I always use Rocket League as the example because I truly believe it's going to be the first one to break out into the household. We think if they put it on ESPN in between games, it would probably do pretty well. We've actually seen it before. ESPN did it for a bit. Sadly, they didn't really have the best production system for it, but if they figured it out, I think it could be really cool. I think some of those players could definitely go on to kind of be a few household names. And then slowly but surely, I think they'd rack it up. I mean, especially with nowadays that it used to just be people knew them by their username, you know, and that would be it. It'd be like a screenshot of their avatar. Now there's face cams for every single player. You can see their face. You can see what they look like. You can associate that player with these cool plays.
Yeah.
I mean, in our league, you know, it's smaller. We have some players like that. Like, for example, one of the other things that I saw was there's a player from University of South Carolina. His name's Carl, goes by Cats. He actually uses hand warmers. A lot of the players do, but he's the first one I saw. I was like, what are you doing over there? He goes, oh, I'm warming up my hands. And I was like, what do you mean? He was sitting there with the hot hands just doing this.
So he'd be limber?
Exactly. He got on there, and he's like, yeah, it makes me able to, you know, use the joysticks a little bit better, keeps my hands moving. And every time I play games now, I love my apartment freezing cold. I sit there, and I'm like, yeah, my hand is cold. Like, this is actually kind of crazy. And I'm like, they're at this point now where it's no longer about just getting skillfully better and practicing. It's keeping your body up, getting your hands limber, your hands warm.
Yeah.
And I start to think that like stuff like that is going to come out just like it has with other sports where, you know, in certain lotions or whatever, the different gloves, you know, stuff like that always is like, oh, well, so-and-so uses this. I think that's going to happen in the esports field, and I think that'll be pretty big.
Let me show you a picture. Let's talk about the founding days. So here is these are your mates, right?
Yeah, those are a couple of my
If
fraternity
that helps,
brothers.
if it's you can see it bigger there.
Oh, yeah.
Look here. Either way, this unfortunately, I guess, was during COVID, and you got your masks on.
Yeah.
But these are the 4 principals, right, in Gaming Oasis.
So, ironically enough, I'm the only founder in that photo.
Okay.
The other 3 guys actually came on to help me with the Boeing Business Challenge.
Ah, gotcha.
Jacob was another founder. He was a UH student at the time, and then Blake was another founder, but he was already graduated, I believe, there.
Okay.
But Patrick, who you'll see on the far left, and then Grant and Christian in order on the right, those are 3 of my fraternity brothers. They're great guys. They actually helped us take our original business plan and just blow it up.
Okay.
You know, it was a good business plan, good investors document. It was just kind of as if some people put it together. Blake was a great guy. He had a graduate with a marketing degree, so he knew what he was doing. There's only so much one guy can do. These 3 guys helped me really just nail it down, kind of sit down and talk about where we're going to take this. They still help out even now with a ton of different stuff. Grant is actually, he's helped me get a couple connections that have been super helpful and just kind of been like, Gaming Oasis is cool. You know, let's check this out. But we ended up going on to get, I think, 2nd place. We were in the entire competition.
That was the Boeing challenge.
It
thing?
was, yeah. It was a really cool experience.
So let's do this. So moving past your first business of kind of, you know, marketing, website development, SEO, things like that, the Gaming Oasis. What was you're playing? I think you mentioned you're a gamer. You're playing games. You enjoy it. When's that moment where you decide, hey, I want to start this company? Esports seems to be a thing that's going to get bigger and bigger. Tell me about that aha moment in those early days.
It was honestly kind of one of those, you ever have those like weird Sunday afternoon conversations with your buds and it's like, oh, let's do this, you know, and it's like, we're never going to do that. But yeah, that'd be cool. Like, oh, what are you going to spend your lottery money on? It was one of those just weird conversations. And then, you know, at the time I was running Wiersig Enterprises and I was actually talking with a buddy, Jacob. He's a good friend of mine, still game with him today. And he was like, you know, Blake had this, at the time he was actually the president of UAH Esports. Blake was the founder of UAH Esports.
Okay.
He was like, yeah, Blake brought up this thing and was like, it'd be cool if we built this esports center. And I was like, it'd be kind of cool. So he's like, Blake joins and we're all talking and it was just like, yeah, we should meet next Sunday and, you know, come up with an idea. And everybody's kind of like, yeah, that'd be so cool. But it's one of those things where you're like, no one's ever going to do this. So I said, all right, 3:00 next Sunday, let's meet. We did it. And we came with a good idea. We actually started on some of those renderings that I had sent you that was in that article. And from there, it just kind of blossomed. Of course, it isn't what we have today. We originally wanted to do an esports center. Well, lo and behold to us, 2 months from that conversation is when COVID-19 started. So we immediately said, okay, so we're probably not going to build a in-person facility where people come in and play on computers in close proximity and touch a bunch of stuff. And so we said, okay, let's back off this idea for a second. Let's just do some fun online tournaments. we did it. We had great connections with like the colleges in Alabama, UNA, UAH, the whole UA system, Auburn, ton of great people there. And Jacob and Blake both knew them. So like, hey guys, come play in these tournaments. They'll be fun. We realized really quickly that we had a niche for collegiate. That's when we started doing, Gaming Oasis, leagues and little events where they could come play. And eventually that would birth the SEL in the far future. But at the time, it was just, this is fun. We're running tournaments. We actually had some Canadian teams come and compete. A couple of people, they spoke French. And I was like, I don't know what to do right now. Like, we never thought we'd get this far.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool.
What platform were you using to host these tournaments? It was all software based, right?
Correct. And so the first one wasn't, and that was a mistake. Luckily, we only had like 4 teams. And so it was just me in an Excel spreadsheet, like, okay, 3-2, 2-3. Okay, everybody won. And then we were like, we're not doing that anymore. Of course, it was only 4 teams, but it was still just annoying. And I was like, there's definitely a better way to do this. So we found a couple softwares, and it was funny when you said migrating between them. We've done that 4 times now, so that was fun. Luckily, there isn't a good enough service yet that like migrating really matters. There's no way to like keep a roster. There's no way to keep teams in like an account. We've thought about making our own custom thing. It'd be pretty expensive, and maybe one day. There's a couple open source alternatives that we've tried, but right now we kind of use a platform called start.gg. It's pretty basic. Some people know it as smash.gg. It was really a platform for Super Smash Bros. Players or Melee players to come on and just make tournaments. And then it evolved into the other esports and did a bunch of stuff like that. And it's been cool. It's pretty useful. It does all the brackets for us. It lets teams upload results. So there's a ton of good stuff there, but there's not really a set in stone one. It's just that start.gg is just kind of universally known as a good one.
So what was going on? What was the scope of esports at UAH before Gaming Oasis came along? Right, Jacob had started it. Like what was the offering? Yeah,
so Jacob and Blake made it. I want to say either my freshman or sophomore year. I assume about freshman year, because Blake had made it the year before. So then Jacob came on. He was Blake's vice president. Blake graduates. Jacob goes on to president. They end up growing the club to like 1,000+ members in just a couple years. I mean, I don't know why people were surprised. It was UAH. I mean, that is the esports club school, if you could imagine one. I mean, I love UAH. I love the nerd culture there. It's been great. We every once in a while we see guys in these huge Warhammer costumes just walking down the campus, and it's like, that's normal here. Everywhere else people are like, what is going on? But they grew it super quick. Over 1,000 members within, I think, 3 or 4 years of founding, which was just unheard of in the community. And so UAH really became a good focal point. It was already on the same league as, University of Alabama, which is a large enough school that 1,000 people for them, it was, okay, cool, we have a club. Here we have, a fifth of the number of students total, and we already had that much. And so they started to organize some events like ChargerCon, which were basically just a little get-together for gamers and other cultures, like the anime clubs, the racing clubs, some of the like Super Smash clubs. And they'd do gaming stuff there. They'd do cosplay competition. They'd do a ton of random Mario Kart competitions, whatever they could really figure out. And so then COVID hit. They canceled that for a year, and Jacob actually was someone who was planning it. They ran an online one during COVID, and that's where a lot of our stuff started to form. There's a lot of restrictions when you're working in like the actual school environment that you don't have outside of it. And so he really found that once he left UAH Esports, it was easier for us to make something like that, and then UAH Esports just be a part of it.
Yeah.
So we brought in all these schools that we had been doing stuff with. We ran production for UAH Esports on an event or two, and that's really how we got our foot in the door on stuff. For me, it was a practice run. We came in with our setup. We said, all right, we'll produce this. Let us do our thing. It worked out great. We ran a season 0, worked out great, and then we just went from there. And so really UAH Esports was kind of a really good stepping stone, something I was pretty passionately involved in alongside Jacob. I didn't go to a lot of the stuff for it, but he'd always keep me involved and be like, hey, check this out. This is what we're doing. It was a ton of fun. They had tons of events.
So when you say you were running production, you were doing the kind of managing or administering the competition, right? I think there was some, I don't know if it's at the point where it's live over Twitch, and you have a play-by-play and a color commentator, right? You have announcers. Then at the end, you're giving prizes. Actually, there's some interviews. So if it was like an hour and 20 minutes, and each game is 20 minutes or so, then you're interviewing the teams after they play. Exactly. Right? That's essentially what you were all doing for them.
Yeah, so prior to launching kind of the SEL in a live format, we'd already done one season of the SEL, but we came in because UH was doing a charity fundraiser called Extra Life. And it was, I think it was actually over Thanksgiving. These could have been two separate events, but I'm almost positive they're the same. They get blurred together sometimes. But it was the Thanksgiving Throwdown. It was a Valorant tournament that the president, his name's Ethan, he's actually the new president at UAH after Jacob, and he put on the event called, Thanksgiving Throwdown. So he was like, hey, Fred, y'all do a great thing over there at Gaming Oasis. And the SEL had, I think, just been announced. And so this was a perfect opportunity for me to give it a little test run. We had our Season 0 where there was no branding, no nothing. It was just Gaming Oasis's Season 0 Collegiate Rocket League. And so no risks, plenty of reward. And it worked out great. And then we came to this. We did an in-person event. We actually got our people to drive down. We had a guy named Scott and a guy named Bepic. They're two of our casters for the sport. And they came down, I went in, our producer Colt came in, and we just created this. So we had a little, almost like an ESPN table in the side room where Bepic and Scott sat. They would cast the game, talk about what was going on. In between matches, it'd cut back to them. They'd talk about the game, what just happened. Yeah. And near the end of the finals, we had winning teams come in and sit down with them. They had a little conversation. It was great. It was really good for a test run, and it kind of gave us a lot of confidence for the future where we'd actually end up hosting the grand finals of the SEL at a UAH ChargerCon. And so it all fit together very nicely with UAH. We're very grateful that they actually kind of let us almost use them as a guinea pig sometimes, but for the most part, I think they had a lot of confidence in us, which was really nice.
Now, did you all create the SEL, or has that already existed?
So the SEL didn't exist. There was actually something in the past called, I think it was the SEI, which was the Southeastern Esports Invitational. Almost positive that was the acronym they used, and it was a one-time thing. It was supposed to be basically what the SEL is. That didn't really work out. Seemingly, some of the people that did it graduated. I'm not too sure. Maybe something else went down, or truthfully, when you're starting these esports league, the money is an issue. I mean, every single person I talk to that does these leagues, because my goal is to not to segment the South. I want to keep us all together. Make sure that anybody who wants to do this can be on my team and help us out. We've brought in people from other sports conferences that were trying to do something similar to what we did for the SEC. But I'm like, hey, guys, by the way, we already have the schools that you want. We will let you just come in here, no questions asked, work with us. Let's make something cool happen. Yeah. And that's been a huge thing for me because in the past, the Southeast was super kind of like anti-working together almost. And so it just kept failing. And so that's what we saw at the SEI was people graduated and no one wanted to take it over because there was no one. And so it could have been something so cool. And I'm glad, and I'm not glad that it didn't work out. I'm glad because now we have our thing and we wouldn't have it without them not working out. But at the same time, they did a really good job. The one event they hosted was pretty awesome. And I truthfully think it's probably just because graduated, not enough time, not enough money. It just didn't work out. It was easier just to let it be a good thing and rest than let it die on its own. Yeah. And so we're pretty grateful for those kind of backbones to build off of. And really and truly, there just wasn't anything else. And so that's where the SEL was born. Is we kept doing these tournaments. People were like, they'd always ask us, are you going to do something for this? Are you going to do something for this? Are you going to have a league? And we'd be like, well, aren't there leagues for y'all to play in? They'd be like, yeah, but they're all leagues that are run by, there's a league called the NECC. It's up in the Northeast. There's a lot of good esports schools up there. And truthfully, they don't have any in-person events. A lot of those schools will go compete in person because they're close. Our schools can't drive, 12 hours to go just play one game, and then that's an hour long and then drive back. It's just not feasible. And they really want to play against teams that are down here because, how cool would it be for Oklahoma to play Alabama? And conversations like that is where the SEL was birthed, was let's make something where you see these matchups and actually get to watch them happen.
So did you spend a lot of time, I guess, reaching out to some of these prior contacts to say, hey, we're going to try and get this going again? And you're kind of also then trying to figure out how to keep it to a short list of the schools, that, somewhat modeling the SEC, I would imagine, right? I mean, it sounds like there may be an outlier, maybe a school in Texas or something like that. But that's essentially what you were trying to do, is just recruit in a way, right?
Yeah, at the beginning we kind of really stuck to Alabama, not really by choice, but more or less that's just who we knew. Yeah. And so we'd grow that slowly but surely, and there was plenty of schools to have a good competition, but I couldn't rest there. I was like, no, we got to do this big. And so I wish I would have sent it to you. I have a little map. I can pull it up in a second if you need me to. But it's a map of basically just the bottom right of the country. It goes all the way over to Texas, goes up to the Virginia area and stuff like that.
Okay.
And it kind of meets in the middle over here up by Oklahoma.
Okay.
And so that's our range. It's basically if you looked at like, the Big 12, SEC, CUSA, AAC, ACC.
ACC, yeah.
I think there's two of them. They mix me up all the time. But it's a lot of those conferences that we basically, any school that was a member of all those conferences is now going to be a part of Season 4.
Okay.
And so at the beginning, yes, the SEC was our goal, and then we just chose schools that were like in the area. This coming season, we've actually been able to bring on staff. We brought up a great esports kind of director for our league, which was what I did, but I need to focus on growing the league, and so I have to somehow part with my baby just a little bit and let someone else take the reins, which I'm very bad at. I'm like,
I know what you
oh,
mean.
I can do it all, I promise. But then I'm like, oh man, this is getting rough. The people ask me a lot of questions, and I'm like, I'll get to you in 2 hours. But Pranav is actually who we brought on. He's great. I mean, he's been helping me with recruitment. He actually took care of like half the schools we've already gotten, which gave me time to go work with our sponsors and pay for the whole thing, which is a lot better than getting all the schools and then being like, ooh, we're out $10,000, everybody. What are we going to do? But no, it was definitely a little bit of a balancing act. And honestly, we took anybody for a while. As we got out there, we were like, please come join us. And we were charging league fees, which good and bad. A lot of the colleges that join us, they're not varsity programs. They're not funded by the school. They don't have $250 to just hand over to be a part of this league and then still pay for travel expenses to get here and play.
Yeah.
We do it online, but then everybody wants that LAN at the end of the season, which is where you come in person and play, and that gets expensive. I mean, especially for, Clemson, who's a pretty big drive.
Mm-hmm.
They had to come down here. They had dodged tornadoes last time. It was a whole thing. We feel only one of the players got here because he drove another school down, and the other players had to play remote. It was a whole thing. But it's good for these schools to give them something free. And so we finally this season said, let's make that short list like what you just said. These are the schools that are coming in. It's schools from those conferences and then schools we deem as primary programs.
Mm-hmm.
UAH is a good example of a primary program. They're not in those traditional sports conferences because, we don't have football.
Right.
But if esports was probably like as big as we want it to be, they would be in esports.
Right.
So the primary programs is kind of our way of giving them a sports conference. So it's been interesting, and we have a good list of those.
I thought is it a reality? NC State, I think, got $16 million to build a facility.
Ton of schools.
And I guess they've been built. Have you visited any of these facilities yet?
I haven't visited any in person. Like, for example, UAH Esports, actually, they started in, I'm not going to say it was a closet, but it wasn't a big room. It was this itty-bitty room with like 3 computers in it. Now they're in the basement of CTC. Not a huge upgrade. It does flood every once in a while, but now they have a room with, 12 computers and then 2 or 3 side rooms like where we did the little casting room. So schools are starting to get stuff like that. Auburn University actually just recently got money from HyperX. Don't quote me on that, anybody, but they got money from an esports brand, presumably HyperX, to build this really cool. You can even pull it up. It's amazing. It's a huge gaming room, and it even has like a central competition room with LED lighting and all sorts of stuff. And they've actually hosted events there recently. One of our competitors, who I like the work they're doing so far, they're really cool. I talked with them already, and they actually hosted at Auburn. The guy who's making it is an ex-Auburn. I think he was the student president there for esports, and they hosted it in the room, and it looked really cool.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of cool stuff like that that's happening at schools where some are getting funding where they can, and some aren't, sadly. And truthfully, I think sometimes it's the ones that really deserve it that aren't getting it. I think a school like UAH could really thrive from esports scholarships. And I'm not saying give them a full ride out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Do it like they do for the marching band or one of the student bands. They give them
academic scholarships.
Yeah, I think it's like $1,000, $2,000, which, I mean, if that's your decision maker in a school, sure, give me $1,000, I'll go there.
Sure.
So a lot of stuff like that. So a lot of like what you just said is popping up slowly but surely, and we've started to see a resurgence these last year or so after COVID.
So give me an idea in your mind's eye and your dream. What does that? Let's consider like the Probst Arena, which seats, well, I don't know, 7,000 maybe.
Yeah.
But if you were, so help us understand, if you're built to build an esports arena, and I'm sure you've got to take into account a lot of requirements
Yeah.
there. What does that arena, does that facility look like? And yeah, just talk me through that.
So I think a really good rendering is the one in the article I sent you, but the easiest way I like to envision it is think about a basketball court.
Yeah.
We need a basketball court. That's all we need. Anything from there is a huge plus. Truthfully, we need about half a basketball court. But if you want to have seating, you want to have, some other stuff going on in the background, have a playing area, and have room for, 4 side games to go on at the same time, a basketball court's a perfect size space. It gives you room for the offices. It gives you room for everything. And so really and truly all an esports arena needs to be is a state-of-the-art production facility that happens to have computers in the middle. I mean, truthfully, that's the easiest way I explain it to people is give me a stage, give me some cool lights, give me about, depending on the game, 6 to 12 computers facing each other. Mm-hmm. We're good to go. Throw a camera on it. Give me some kind of good internet, hopefully. That's one of the bigger things. It's all tech requirements is good computers, good internet, stage. You can have an esports event. I mean, super simple. Like at ChargerCon, what we did is it was just in a side room where the week we looked at it, they were teaching a Taekwondo class. So they just put the middle wall down, gave us half the space, 2 long desks with some power cable strips and stuff. We need a little bit more than power strip, but you kind of know what I'm saying here is we put I think it was 12 computers on one side, 12 computers on the other side. Rocket League is 3v3. There you go. We had our production booth kind of up in the front right corner. Put a camera on the players, put a camera on the casters, and that was it.
Were they all hardwiring into like a Ethernet switch, and then it was going out
exactly
via? Yeah. Like what was your bandwidth with your internet provider?
Well, so the crazy thing is we don't really need that good a bandwidth because everything's LAN. It's all local. Okay. And that's where things get, everybody's like, well, you probably need like 10 gig internet. I'm like, well, actually, we only need about, 250, 500. We need a residential internet, a good residential plan. And really the only thing that'll use it is our actual broadcast. Everything else theoretically, which you would think it'd be lossless. It's not, but we say it is. We say, oh, yeah, it's great, lossless. It's all good. It's just kind of a pipe dream at that point for some gamers where it's like, well, the guy who's hosting gets a better ping or whatever. But no, they're all connected LAN right on the same network and makes it easy. And for our online competitions, same deal. They're all at their own homes. They connect over the internet. So really and truly, the Ethernet and stuff doesn't become an issue, which is really nice. Yeah. It would be a nightmare, I think, if we had to somehow network everything together and, have a good enough connection that, the 24 computers that are running are fine. And sure, they're on Discord sometimes, and that could cause issues. But for the most part, we don't run into any issues there, which is really nice because it's just a matter of the right number of outlets and at least one Ethernet port. So,
and then you're sending the output though out to the internet so people can watch it?
Yes. So basically the way it works is the teams are playing Rocket League, right? We have our producer. Really, in the ideal world, we'll have a producer, an observer, and that's it. And so the observer, his job is to basically spectate the game. And the way we do that is Colt's our observer/producer. He usually does both for Rocket League. Is we actually have a pretty cool system. Our guy Jacob actually coded a system that reads Rocket League's game code and updates live scoreboards, live information, which means Colt just has to sit there. He's doing great. He says, I love it. I get paid. I just sit here and watch. When something breaks, it's a whole nother story. Happens a lot.
Wow.
But what he does is he'll join the games over the network. Or if we're in person, he'll join over LAN. And it's that easy. He just spectates, and so we're not even streaming anything. The computer that's his laptop, we have a little gaming laptop that he watches the game on. We have a capture card that runs between that and the little mini ITX with the handle PC. Once that plugs into it, it basically just feeds the screen. So he's watching the game. He has it set up. If something goes wrong, he'll fix it. It feeds the overlay in the game into the streaming computer, which has OBS on it. And it's that easy. From there, OBS just shoots up to Twitch or YouTube, whatever we want to use, and that's the entire setup. Sure, there's a little more in there with what you have with like the Blackmagic stuff. We actually use some of our Focusrite stuff for our mics, but past that it's honestly a pretty closed loop, simple system.
Got it. How much? I was thinking about this today. Actually, let me do this. Let me show you your logo there. This is your SEL.
Yeah, and that's actually the online tournament page.
That was your season 3 that I actually watched it today. I was eating lunch at Nukes, and I was watching probably the last match, right? It was it Bippet. What's his name?
Bepic. Yeah.
Bepic and the other guy were commentating, and you were there, kind of in the background. They're giving you a shout out. But it's kind of a cool logo. Did you design that?
So actually, we had a guy come in and do a lot of our branding, and so all of our stream production, our logo, everything is all from the same people. Really nice. It was a great kind of branding setup that we did. It was some of our people that we'd used for my Wiersig Enterprises company. I got very lucky that I had done a lot of the stuff that you would just have to do for any business already so many times for our clients, that for me it was like I'm working for myself. Yeah. So it was great. It was really easy. And so we made as much content as we could, really. You know, we put in a lot of work on the stream production overlays, like what you saw today with the animations and things like that.
Yeah.
That was a huge part of it. And really and truly, it's what we get the most feedback on. People love our production, and we try to make it personal. You know, you might have noticed, but the field changes colors. The ball has our logo on it. The cars change colors. The scoreboards, their school colors. We try and build that personality. And, you know, our end goal is they fly into Huntsville. They get to their hotel room. You know, one of our sponsors, Red Bull, they love doing cool stuff. Yeah. We had an idea last season that we're probably going to hopefully implement this coming season if they come on board again, which we're hoping they do. They're a great sponsor. We love working with them. They've had a lot of fun with us. Put a case of Red Bull on their bed, and it's like, welcome to Huntsville. Have a good game, you know? Yeah. And football players from, you know, schools like Alabama, they probably get that kind of experience. And we want to give the players the experience where they have a fully branded league that they get to play in with custom overlays that you don't see anywhere else. You get to come play, get some merch out of it, get a cool trophy, and just have fun. And I mean, that's where it comes in from, like what you saw, just having that cool branding. It makes it fun. You know, a lot of people, they don't even do anything custom. It's just the native game overlay. And it's like, I'm just spectating the game as if I was the one doing it, you know?
So now let's talk about, so at UAH, there's kind of this aspect of scholarships or part of the curriculum, if you will. I was listening to a couple, like, you know, esports podcasts, right, over the last couple of days, just trying to do some research and just hear different elements. And, you know, I guess, you know, for example, we have the cyber school here in Huntsville. And sometimes I think that's hard for people to wrap their heads around. Like, wait a minute, so you don't do like math and English? Like, you know, well, what's going on there? It's just cyber education. North Dakota is the first statewide mandating cyber curriculum.
That's cool.
In their curriculum, right? Cyber security education.
Yeah, I think everybody should have the basics at least.
Yeah, and you know, it's kind of the world that we live in now. But so I would imagine there's the aspects of maturing esports at UAH such that people, students can get scholarships. Yes, you're still going to come and major in something.
Exactly.
Right. But you're also there to be paid or defray some of the cost because you're going to be competing in esports. Then I guess there's also kind of this culture side where the curriculum is such that people are coming into esports, but it may be more of like an extension of marketing. I mean, or game design or screenplay. Like there's just, can you talk about that? What's going on, I guess, from a curriculum standpoint where esports has what's the word I'm looking for?
Some form of academia backing.
Yeah, exactly. And inspired it, I guess. Yeah. Or influenced it.
So we're already starting to see a little bit of it, which is awesome. So there's a college called Full Sail. They're actually kind of known
in Florida, right?
Exactly. Yeah. They have this thing called the Full Sail Arena. Or it's the Armada Arena, something along those lines. It's the Full Sail Armada. It's their esports team. It is a massive, just super cool esports arena. Well, it spawned because one of their leading things, to my knowledge, was their game design major. And I'm almost positive it was fully online, so it got really popular. And so a lot of people came and did that, and they actually compete in our league. They were in it last season, and they're one of the first groups. They have full-time staff, multiple staff members, which is really rare, even for just massive schools that maybe even just focus in esports, that are paid full-time members that their sole purpose is being esports coaches. They coach the esports teams. They have ones that manage the arena, which is a little more believable sometimes just because it's a facility on campus, but they even have student staff. So, you know, just like you would be maybe the AV guy at school, you know, you're the AV guy, but for the esports team.
Right.
Same way you'd be probably like, you know, team manager on the football team.
Right.
Same thing for the esports. I don't know if they have full rides or scholarships, but they do stipends and stuff like that. Same over at Oklahoma. And I love speaking about Oklahoma because they do good stuff. They, to my knowledge, have, and I think they're actually upping it this coming semester where it's even more intense, where let's say you're the social media manager for the esports team. They're acknowledging roles like that normally in a club would be, just something you do. Now they're getting stipends. The coaches, the people that they have an events coordinator that we work with sometimes. I think his role is events coordinator. He basically communicates with the leagues that they compete in and organizes schedules, figures out what teams are playing, does reschedules for matches. And these people who sometimes get kind of hidden in the behind the scenes of, well, esports is for the players. Well, there's a ton of other stuff that goes into it.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at these games. I'm absolutely terrible. Everybody's like, oh, you're probably really good. No, you put me out there, it's going to be bad. Mm-hmm. And so I really appreciate when the people like me in the industry who do the behind the scenes start to kind of get that recognition in the clubs and the academia and stuff like that. It's really big for us. And so we see every day that it's not just the players that are getting recognized with those scholarships or stipends, which, yes, they need to be recognized first. They need to get those full rides. I'm a firm believer of that. If you do it, it will work out. I promise, schools, it will. Yeah. I mean, we know you got the money to do it. We're not worried about that. But we see it every day when they start incorporating all those roles. The same concept of, that student marching band at UAH where they get that little stipend. One, it adds legitimacy to it. Two, it encourages people just to take that one more step and do it. College is already so busy and such a stressful time. You're like, I don't want to do the social media for this club. It's going to take up 6 hours a week. My girlfriend actually did a couple social medias on campus, and she was like, this is a lot more time than I expected. And once you're doing a social media for one, every club is like, hey, you want to come over here?
Right.
You're doing good. And so we see that a lot in the esports field where people are doing tons of stuff. Like pretty much everybody that worked for us also did something with their esports club. And UNA actually was a couple of our not founding members, but they were on board right at the beginning. The Scott guy had mentioned another guy named Dallas. Dallas actually got an extension from a marketing major that focuses on esports. It is an actual degree there.
Really?
And so it's really cool to see that schools are starting to do that. And I want to say he said it's like a kind of a marketing/communications type degree, but it's basically esports communications. And so he has a huge specialty of, meeting cool connections in esports all through that program. And there's actually a few schools that have started doing that. So kind of what you were talking about has slowly started coming to life a little bit. And it's exciting to see it. I mean, we see it every day. I mean, just the other day, you surprised me when you mentioned that new arena over there. I didn't even know about that yet.
Yeah.
And we see those pop up all the time. It's like this random school got one donor that said, you know what, esports is cool.
It wasn't even, what's amazing, it wasn't a donor. It was from the state.
Oh, wow.
The government gave it to them.
That's even better.
It's even better, right?
Because we've seen that not as often at all, but a few times. Like, for example, Montevallo, they had someone who I guess graduated and played esports there.
Sure.
They hit it big in esports, donated some money back. It's a varsity program now. Of course, so they have varsity and junior varsity teams that play.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. I mean, it's amazing to see it. I mean, we see it all the time.
Going back to, just in case anybody's not familiar, Full Sail. The only reason I know that, my brother is in Hollywood, the unions, right? He's he builds sets. He's lighting, video, sound. But he, out of high school, they were kind of told, you go to somewhere like Full Sail, or you have to go somewhere for a 6 month.
They've got a lot of interesting degrees.
It's 6 months to a year. It's not, but you have to, it's like getting a certification in a way. And that helps you then to market yourself with the unions when they hire you. And then you just kind of start out doing whatever. Yeah. There's a long list of credits, right? When you watch a movie, and those are all those people that left high school and went to a Full Sail or wherever to hopefully start working in the Hollywood.
Yeah,
and it sounds like maybe kind of like what you're saying, especially with esports, is a great chance for maybe other schools now to be kind of like, hey, you don't necessarily have to go to Full Sail or some of these other things if you want to get into video production or game design, because now it's just so big and it's so ubiquitous.
Yeah, what we see a lot is kind of like the mix of what you're saying, where it's a minor. You get your marketing degree, but you can get a minor in esports, and it's 6 classes. It has a little bit of game design, a little bit of sponsorship acquisition, and a little bit 2 classes that are esports specific. And I think that's where UNA's program started, because when I met Dallas, he was like, oh yeah, I'm doing this esports minor. Well, now he's like, I have a degree in esports, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on here?
So it turned into a major?
little confused there. Something. Yeah. There's some form of minor major situation going on. I think it might be a concentration more than it is anything.
Okay.
Kind of like, computer science with a concentration in cyber.
Right.
Same concept there. It's marketing, concentration in esports. And I think that's the way to do it, because esports isn't at the point yet where you can do a full major, but it's definitely something where you could get that concentration where worst case scenario, you have the major to fall back on. But if you get a chance in esports, you'll really shine.
Yeah.
And that's what's exciting, is it's not just UNA and Full Sail that we're seeing. It's like what you mean is like there are other schools coming out there and saying, we might as well throw a minor in here. We might as well put a concentration out here. We might as well even maybe explore a major, because it's a huge industry and people are interested in it,
Yeah.
A couple of our staff members actually so far they were looking for esports positions at universities. One of our guys, Kyle, he actually got I think he got accepted into some kind of master's program that was related to esports. I don't know where yet. He just announced it on his LinkedIn a little while back, but it was because he was going to help coach their esports team. So it's almost as if, kind of like a resident director, resident assistants type of deal where, you go and you watch the kids in the dorms for a while and they pay for your housing and, a master's. Same deal, but now it's starting to happen for esports. And so it's exciting to see that, because those are easy ways for the universities to help fill roles that they're looking for, but also start to explore the esports avenue a bit more.
Yeah.